Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Defiance, watching the green and blue marble of Earth slowly rotate beneath them. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, almost serene. She knew better. Down there, billions of humans were going about their daily lives, completely unaware that their entire species had just been sentenced to extinction. The communication from the Galactic Cleansing Council had arrived 3 hours ago. Standard diplomatic channels, delivered with all the bureaucratic politeness that intergalactic law required. Humanity had been classified as a Class 7 aggressive species and would be subject to preventive cleansing protocols within 72 hours. The message had been clear. Humanity's rapid technological advancement, combined with their inherent violent tendencies and territorial expansion, posed an unacceptable risk to galactic stability. The Council had observed human history through their monitoring stations hidden throughout the solar system. They had watched the wars, the genocides, the environmental destruction. They had seen enough. Sarah's fingers drummed against the reinforced viewing port as she remembered the rest of the message. The cleansing would be swift and merciful. Orbital bombardment followed by atmospheric sterilization. Earth would be quarantined for 50 years before being prepared for colonization by more suitable species. Humanity would be remembered as a cautionary tale. Behind her, the bridge crew worked in tense silence. They had all heard the transmission. Every military installation, every government facility, every major city on Earth had received the same message. The reactions had been predictable. Panic in the streets, emergency sessions in every capital, religious leaders proclaiming the end times while scientists desperately calculated escape velocities. But Sarah wasn't thinking about escape. She was thinking about the files hidden in the deepest vaults of human military intelligence, files that contained information the Galactic Council didn't know they had, information that changed everything. "Admiral," came a voice behind her. Captain Rodriguez approached with a data pad in his hands. "We've received responses from the other defense platforms. Olympus Station reports ready. Luna Base is at full deployment. The Mars colonies have activated their defensive arrays." Sarah nodded without turning around. The human defense grid was impressive by Earth standards. Orbital weapons platforms, missile defense systems, even a few experimental energy weapons that pushing the boundaries of human engineering. Against conventional threats, they might have been enough. Against the Galactic Cleansing Fleet, they were toys. "What about the Prometheus files?" she asked quietly. Rodriguez hesitated. "Dr. Yates is already en route to the facility. The research team has been placed on high alert. But Admiral, even if the theories are correct, we're talking about untested technology. The risks, Sarah interrupted, finally turning to face him, are irrelevant. We're already facing extinction. At this point, anything that gives us a fighting chance is worth pursuing." She walked past him toward the command center, her boots echoing against the metal decking. The bridge was a hive of activity. Communication officers coordinated with defense installations across the solar system. Tactical specialists ran probability calculations on their screens. Everyone was preparing for a war they knew they couldn't win. But Sarah had spent the last 15 years preparing for something else entirely. She had been part of a classified program that most humans didn't even know existed. While the public focused on exploring Mars and establishing mining operations in the asteroid belt, a select group of scientists and military officials had been investigating something far more significant. The discovery had been made by accident. A mining operation on Ceres had uncovered something that shouldn't have existed. Ancient technology buried beneath the asteroid's surface. Technology that was clearly not human, but wasn't from any known alien species either. The artifacts had been quietly transported to a secret research facility built into the dark side of the moon. Dr. Elizabeth Yates had led the research team for over a decade. What they found challenged everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. The technology was old. Incredibly old. Older than human civilization, older than recorded galactic history, and it was designed for war. The artifacts told a story that the Galactic Council had tried very hard to erase. Long before the current galactic civilization had emerged, there had been another species. The records called them the Architects. They had been the dominant force in the galaxy for millions of years. They had built incredible cities, created technologies that bordered on magic, and established a peaceful confederation of hundreds of species. and then they had been betrayed. The species that would eventually become the Galactic Council had risen up against their benefactors. They had used the Architect's own technology against them, corrupting their peaceful nature and turning their greatest strengths into weaknesses. The war had lasted centuries, ending only when the Architects chose to sacrifice themselves rather than allow their technology to be completely corrupted. But they had left something behind. Hidden caches of their most powerful weapons, sealed away with genetic locks that could only be opened by a species that met specific criteria, aggressive enough to understand the need for such weapons, but not so corrupted as to use them for conquest. A species that could serve as a safeguard against the return of those who had committed the original genocide. The genetic markers had been clear. Humanity was a descendant species of the Architects, not direct descendants but close enough. The weapons would respond to human operators. Sarah reached the command center and activated the secure communication channel. Dr. Yates's face appeared on the screen, surrounded by the sterile walls of the Lunar Research Facility. "Admiral," Yates said without preamble, "we've successfully activated the primary systems. The weapon platforms are coming online, but I have to warn you, the power requirements are enormous. If we activate the full array, every power grid on Earth will need to be rerouted to support it." "Do it," Sarah replied. "How long until the systems are fully operational?"
6 hours.
"Maybe less if we push the activation sequence." Sarah checked the chronometer on her wrist. The Galactic Cleansing Fleet would arrive in 68 hours. More than enough time to prepare humanity's surprise. "Doctor, I need you to understand something. When we activate those weapons, there's no going back. The galaxy will know what we're capable of. The Council will learn that they made a mistake classifying us as just another aggressive species. We're something much more dangerous." Yates smiled grimly. "Admiral, after reviewing the full capabilities of this technology, I don't think dangerous begins to cover it. The Architects built these weapons to fight gods. We're about to find out if the current galactic powers qualify." Sarah cut the transmission and turned to address her bridge crew. They were watching her with expressions of hope mixed with terror. They knew something significant was happening, but not what. "All stations, prepare for full activation of Project Prometheus. Authorization Omega 77. This is not a drill." The communications officer looked up from her station. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender demands from the approaching fleet. They're requesting immediate cessation of all defensive preparations." Sarah looked back out at Earth one more time. Soon the planet would be at the center of a conflict that would reshape the entire galaxy. The Galactic Council thought they were coming to eliminate a troublesome young species. They had no idea they were about to face the inheritors of the galaxy's most ancient and powerful civilization. "Send a reply," she said calmly. "Tell them we decline their generous offer, and inform them that Earth's restraint protocols have just been permanently deactivated." Fleet Commander Zeth Kari had overseen 47 cleansing operations during his distinguished career with the Galactic Council. He took no pleasure in the work, but understood its necessity. Young species were like cancer cells if left unchecked. They multiplied, consumed resources, and eventually threatened the stability of the entire galactic body. Better to remove them early, before they could spread their aggression to other systems. The human species had shown all the warning signs. Rapid technological advancement achieved through constant warfare. Territorial expansion driven by resource consumption rather than sustainable development. A complete inability to achieve internal peace despite sharing a single small planet. The psychological profiles were clear. Humans were inherently violent, unstable, and would eventually pose a threat to every peaceful species in the galaxy. Zeth Kari stood in the command chamber of the cleansing vessel Eternal Harmony, reviewing the tactical reports one final time. His fleet consisted of 12 primary assault ships, each capable of reducing a planet's surface to molten slag within hours. Supporting them were 48 support vessels carrying atmospheric processors that would scrub away any remaining traces of human civilization. It was more firepower than had been used against the last 3 species combined, but the Council had been unusually concerned about human defensive capabilities. "Fleet Commander," his tactical officer announced, "we are receiving communications from the target system. The humans appear to be responding to our cleansing notification." Zeth Kari activated the communication array. A human female appeared on the screen, wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. She was older than most humans he had observed, with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to look directly through the transmission. Behind her, he could see other humans working at primitive computer terminals. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Command," the human said. "I acknowledge receipt of your cleansing notification. However, I must inform you that Earth formally rejects the Council's jurisdiction over our species." Zethkari felt his crest bristle with surprise. In 47 cleansing operations, no species had ever rejected the Council's authority. Most begged for mercy or additional time. Some attempted to negotiate. None had ever simply said no. "Human Admiral," he replied, using the translation protocols, "you appear to misunderstand your situation. This is not a negotiation. The Galactic Cleansing Council has determined that your species poses an unacceptable risk to galactic stability. Cleansing will proceed as scheduled." The human's expression didn't change. "Fleet Commander, you appear to misunderstand your situation. Earth has been monitoring your communications since you entered our solar system. We know the composition of your fleet, the capabilities of your weapons, and the tactical doctrine you intend to employ. What you don't know is what we're capable of in return." Zethkari almost found himself amused. Human arrogance was legendary among Council observers. Even facing extinction, they maintained their aggressive posture. "Human Admiral, our records indicate that your species has achieved only basic orbital flight and primitive energy weapons. Your defensive capabilities are insufficient to pose any meaningful resistance to Council forces." "Your records," the human replied, "are incomplete." The transmission ended abruptly. Zethkari stared at the blank screen for several moments before turning to his tactical officer. "Increase scanning intensity. I want a complete analysis of human defensive installations. If they have hidden capabilities, I need to know about them before we begin the cleansing protocol." The next 6 hours revealed nothing unusual. Human defensive installations were exactly as the Council's intelligence reports had indicated. Orbital weapons platforms with conventional explosive warheads, missile defense systems using chemical propulsion, energy weapons that barely qualified as military grade. The humans had even activated what appeared to be their most advanced installations, revealing their positions and capabilities to the Council scanners. Zethkari reviewed the tactical assessment with growing confidence. The humans were bluffing. Their defensive capabilities were precisely what the Council had expected from a young, aggressive species. Impressive by primitive standards, but completely inadequate against Council technology. "Fleet Commander," his communications officer announced, "we are receiving another transmission from the human command vessel." The same human admiral appeared on the screen. This time her expression had changed subtly. She looked almost disappointed. "Fleet Commander Zethkari," she began, somehow knowing his name despite their communications protocols, "my tactical teams have completed their analysis of your fleet capabilities. I had hoped that the Council's reputation for advanced technology was more than propaganda, but it appears we overestimated your development level." Zethkari's crest flattened against his skull. The human was not only refusing to show appropriate deference, she was insulting his fleet's capabilities. "Human Admiral, your bravado is impressive but irrelevant. Council technology is beyond your comprehension." "Actually," the human replied, "it really isn't. Your ships use quantum resonance drives for faster-than-light travel. Your weapons are based on directed plasma discharge. Your defensive systems rely on electromagnetic barrier generation. Your tactical doctrine emphasizes overwhelming firepower, delivered from maximum range to minimize risk to your own forces. Standard operating procedure for a technologically stagnant military organization that hasn't faced real opposition in centuries." Zethkari felt something cold move through his circulatory system. The human had accurately described technologies that were classified at the highest levels of Council security. Information that should have been impossible for a primitive species to obtain. Furthermore, the human continued, "Your scanning systems have been mapping our defensive installations for the past 6 hours. You've cataloged every orbital platform, every missile installation, every energy weapon emplacement. You believe you have a complete tactical picture of Earth's capabilities." She paused, and for the first time since the transmission began, she smiled. "You're wrong." Behind her, Zethkari could see other humans working frantically at their primitive terminals. Suddenly, every display showed the same image, a star chart of the local solar system. Red markers appeared indicating the positions of his fleet. Blue markers showed human defensive installations. And then new markers began appearing, green markers, dozens of them, hundreds, positioned throughout the solar system in locations that Council scanners had detected nothing. As Zethkari watched in growing horror, the green markers began moving. They were ships. Human ships, ships that had been completely invisible to Council detection systems. "Fleet Commander," the human admiral said quietly, "I need you to understand something about our species. For the past 15 years, we've known about the Council's monitoring stations in our system. We've known about your classification protocols and your cleansing procedures. We've known that eventually you would come for us." The tactical displays around Zethkari's command chamber began flashing warning signals. His officers were reporting sensor contacts appearing throughout the system. Ships that registered no energy signatures, no heat emissions, no electromagnetic profiles. They were there, but they might as well have been ghosts. "We've spent those 15 years preparing," the human continued, "not by building bigger guns or stronger armor, but by studying your technology and developing countermeasures. Every monitoring station you placed in our system became a source of intelligence about Council capabilities. Every surveillance sweep taught us how your detection systems work. Every recorded communication gave us insight into your tactical doctrines." Zethkari's tactical officer approached his command position with visible distress. "Fleet Commander, we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the system. Power sources that dwarf our own ship reactors. They appear to be connected to installations we cannot detect or scan." The human admiral's image leaned forward slightly. "The Council has spent millennia believing that it represents the pinnacle of galactic civilization. You've grown comfortable with your technological superiority over younger species. You've forgotten that technological advancement requires pressure, conflict, and innovation. Things your peaceful Federation abandoned long ago." She gestured toward something outside the camera's view. "What you're detecting are weapons that your civilization could never build, because your civilization has never needed them. They were created by a species that understood what it meant to fight for survival against overwhelming odds." Warning alarms began sounding throughout Zethkari's ship. His defensive systems were registering targeting locks from unknown sources. Weapons were being aimed at his fleet from positions that Council scanners insisted were empty space. "Human Admiral," he said, struggling to maintain his command composure. "What are you?" The human's smile widened, but it was not a pleasant expression. "We're the species you came to exterminate, Fleet Commander. We're also the inheritors of the technology your ancestors used to commit genocide against the architects, and we're the reason that technology was hidden away and locked behind genetic safeguards." She stood up from her command chair. Aysen Zethkari could see that her bridge crew was watching their displays with expressions of grim satisfaction. "You called it cleansing, Fleet Commander. We call it the end of Restraint. Earth's defensive protocols have been operating under strict limitations for our entire recorded history. We've been holding back our true capabilities to avoid attracting attention from species like yours." The tactical displays showed the human ships moving into attack positions around his fleet. They moved with impossible speed and precision, as if space itself was bending to accommodate their passage. "Those limitations," the human admiral said quietly, "have just been permanently removed." Dr. Elizabeth Yates had spent 13 years trying to understand technology that defied every principle of physics she had learned in her decades of research. The architect artifacts recovered from Ceres had challenged not just human scientific knowledge, but the fundamental understanding of how the universe operated. Standing in the control chamber of Luna Base's most classified facility, she watched as systems that had remained dormant for millions of years came to life under human command. The chamber itself was carved from the moon's bedrock, its walls lined with architect technology that had been painstakingly integrated with human control systems. The result was a hybrid command center that looked like something from humanity's distant future. "If humanity survived the next few hours," Dr. Yates called her assistant, Dr. Marcus Webb, from his position at the primary control console. "The weapon platforms are responding perfectly to human neural interfaces. The genetic locks are recognizing our command codes without any resistance." Elizabeth nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had been growing since they began the activation sequence. The architect technology was responding too well to human operators. It was as if it had been designed specifically for them, rather than locked away from unworthy species. "Dr. Yates," another technician called from across the chamber, We're receiving confirmation signals from all 17 platform sites. The installations in the asteroid belt are fully operational. The Mars Defensive Array is online. Even the deep space platforms beyond Pluto are responding to commands. Elizabeth reviewed the tactical display, showing the positions of the hidden weapon platforms throughout the solar system. Each one was a marvel of architect engineering, hidden from detection by technology that bent spacetime around them. For 15 years, humanity had been secretly constructing and installing these weapons while the galaxy believed Earth possessed only primitive defensive capabilities. But the true marvel wasn't the technology itself. It was what the technology revealed about humanity's place in galactic history. "Dr. Webb," Elizabeth said quietly, "bring up the genetic analysis files. I want to review the architect DNA comparisons one more time." The display changed to show complex genetic sequences side by side. Human DNA on the left, architect DNA fragments recovered from the artifacts on the right. The similarities were undeniable, but what troubled Elizabeth was the nature of those similarities. "Ma'am," Webb said hesitantly, "are you still concerned about the compatibility levels? The genetic locks have accepted human operators without any problems." Elizabeth studied the data streams flowing across her screens. The architect weapons weren't just responding to human commands. They were enhancing human capabilities. Operators who interfaced with the systems reported increased reaction times, expanded sensory perception, and intuitive understanding of technologies that should have taken years to master. "Webb, look at these neural integration patterns. The architect technology isn't just recognizing human genetics as compatible, it's actively improving human performance when we interface with it. That's not how safeguard systems normally operate." Her assistant moved to review the data himself. "You think there's something we're missing about the relationship between humans and the architects?" Before Elizabeth could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. The tactical display shifted to show the approaching Galactic Council fleet and the emerging human defensive positions. Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system, calm but urgent. "Luna Base, this is Admiral Chen. The Council fleet has detected our weapon platforms. We're beginning defensive operations in 30 minutes. I need confirmation that all architect systems are fully operational." Elizabeth activated her communication link. "Admiral, all weapon platforms are online and responding to human command. But I need to warn you about something we've discovered during the activation sequence." "What is it, Doctor?" Elizabeth hesitated. What she was about to say would fundamentally change humanity's understanding of their own history. "Admiral, the genetic compatibility between humans and architect technology is too perfect. The systems aren't just accepting our commands. They're integrating with human consciousness in ways that suggest we're not just compatible with architect technology, we might actually be architect technology." The communication channel remained silent for several long moments. Finally, Admiral Chen's voice returned, carefully controlled. "Explain." "The DNA comparisons show that humans aren't descendants of the architects. We're their final creation, a species specifically designed to carry their technology and capabilities forward through genetic encoding. We're not just using their weapons, Admiral. We are their weapons." Elizabeth brought up additional data on her screens, showing the integration patterns between human operators and architect systems. Every human who interfaces with the technology shows immediate enhancement of cognitive and physical capabilities. The systems are activating dormant genetic sequences in our DNA, unlocking capabilities that have been hidden in our species since we first evolved. "Dr. Yates," Admiral Chen said slowly, "are you telling me that humanity is an artificial species? Not artificial, enhanced. The architects took an existing species and encoded their technology directly into the genetic structure. We're not just their inheritors, Admiral. We're their revenge." The implications hit Elizabeth even as she spoke the words. Humanity's entire history suddenly made sense from a different perspective. The rapid technological advancement, the instinctive understanding of complex systems, the aggressive expansion into space. It wasn't random evolution. It was programming. "The Galactic Council didn't classify us as dangerous because we're violent," Elizabeth continued. "They classified us as dangerous because some part of their institutional memory recognizes what we really are. They know, even if they don't consciously understand, that we're the weapon the architects created to ensure their betrayers could never feel completely secure." Admiral Chen's voice took on a grim tone. "Doctor, how much of our enhanced capabilities can the systems unlock?" Elizabeth looked at the data flowing across her screens. Human operators throughout the solar system were interfacing with architect technology, and each connection was activating more dormant genetic sequences. Unknown, Admiral. But if the integration patterns continue at this rate, humanity might be capable of far more than either of us imagined. "Dr. Yates," Webb called from his console, "we're receiving priority signals from the weapon platforms. They're requesting permission to activate what the system labels as terminal protocols." Elizabeth felt something cold move through her chest. Terminal protocols wasn't a designation she recognized from their research. "What are terminal protocols?" Webb's face paled as he reviewed the system data. "According to the architect databases, terminal protocols are comprehensive conflict resolution procedures. The systems are asking permission to eliminate not just the immediate threat, but all potential sources of future threat." Elizabeth's hands moved across her control console, accessing deeper levels of the architect databases. What she found made her understand why the architects had locked their technology away behind genetic safeguards. The weapons platforms weren't just defensive systems. They were tools of absolute warfare, designed to ensure that any species threatening architect interests would never be able to threaten anyone again. "Admiral," she said urgently, "the architect technology isn't just weapon systems. It's a complete military doctrine designed around the concept of permanent conflict resolution. If we activate terminal protocols, we won't just be defending Earth. We'll be declaring war on the entire galactic civilization that destroyed the architects. And what happens if we don't activate them?" Elizabeth reviewed the tactical display showing the Council fleet's approach vectors and weapons capabilities. "Earth gets sterilized and the architect legacy dies with us." Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system with finality. "Doctor, how long would it take to fully activate human genetic potential using the architect systems?" Elizabeth checked the integration data. At current enhancement rates, approximately 6 hours for complete activation across all interfaced personnel. "Do it." Authorization Omega-7. 7 Alpha. Full genetic activation for all human operators. Elizabeth's fingers hesitated over the control systems. Once she initiated the full activation sequence, there would be no going back. Humanity would become something entirely different. But as she watched the Council fleet approaching Earth with the intention of committing genocide, she realized they didn't have a choice. "Beginning full genetic activation sequence," she announced to her team. "All personnel, prepare for enhanced integration with architect systems." As the activation sequence began, Elizabeth felt something fundamental changing in her mind. Information that had always been just beyond her understanding suddenly became clear. Technologies that had taken years to partially comprehend now seemed as natural as breathing. And somewhere in the back of her consciousness, she could feel the presence of something ancient and patient, finally awakening after millions of years of dormancy. The architects had been patient. They had waited millions of years for their creation to mature, to develop enough to survive what was coming. Now, as their genetic legacy finally awakened in human consciousness, they could begin the work they had been designed for. The Council had called it cleansing. The architects called it justice. Captain Maria Santos had been piloting the stealth frigate Ghost of Titan for 3 years, but she had never experienced anything like what was happening to her now. As the architect enhancement protocols flooded through her system, her understanding of her ship's capabilities expanded exponentially. Controls that had once required careful coordination now responded to her thoughts. Tactical systems that had taken minutes to calculate now processed solutions in microseconds. But the most disturbing change was in her perception of the enemy fleet approaching Earth. Through the enhanced sensors, she could see the Council ships as more than just metal and energy. She could perceive the intentions of their crews, the tactical doctrines encoded in their movement patterns, and the fundamental weaknesses in their technological approach that made them vulnerable to weapons they couldn't even detect. "Captain," called Lieutenant Harrison from the tactical station, "the enhancement protocols are showing me targeting solutions that shouldn't be possible. The architect systems are calculating attack vectors through folded space-time." Maria nodded, watching similar impossible data flow across her own displays. The Ghost of Titan was one of 48 stealth vessels positioned throughout the solar system, each one equipped with architect technology that had been reverse engineered over the past 15 years. But now, with the full enhancement protocols active, the ships were revealing capabilities that human engineers had never suspected. Navigation. What's our actual maximum velocity? Ensign Park checked his enhanced displays and his face went pale. Captain, according to the architect systems, our speed is limited only by our destination. The drive systems can fold space to bring any point in the galaxy within immediate reach. Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. Humanity had been flying ships capable of instantaneous galactic travel without realizing it. The implications were staggering. Communications. Patch me through to Admiral Chen. Admiral, Maria said when the connection established. Captain Santos reporting from stealth position Gamma 7. Ma'am, the enhancement protocols are revealing ship capabilities that far exceed our original understanding. My crew is reporting tactical options that suggest we could engage the Council fleet from positions they can't even perceive. Admiral Chen's voice came through with calm authority. Captain, all stealth vessels are reporting similar discoveries. We're coordinating a system-wide engagement that will demonstrate to the Council exactly what they're facing. Maria studied the tactical display showing the positions of human forces throughout the solar system. What had appeared to be a desperate defensive action was revealing itself as something far more sophisticated. The Council fleet was being drawn into a carefully prepared trap, surrounded by weapons they couldn't detect using tactics they couldn't comprehend. Captain Santos, Admiral Chen continued, your vessel has been selected for the initial demonstration. You'll be engaging the Council flagship at close range using enhanced combat protocols. Maria felt her enhanced consciousness automatically begin calculating attack vectors. The Council flagship was a massive vessel, over 2 kilometers long and equipped with enough firepower to devastate a planet. Under normal circumstances, her frigate would have been utterly outmatched. But the architect enhancements were showing her weaknesses in the Council ship's design that made it vulnerable to precisely the kind of attack her vessel could deliver. Understood, Admiral. We'll show them what human restraint was protecting them from. Maria turned to address her crew. All stations, prepare for enhanced combat operations. We're about to engage a target that outmasses us by a factor of 50. Under normal circumstances, this would be suicide. These are not normal circumstances. The bridge crew worked with superhuman efficiency as the architect enhancements optimized their performance. Lieutenant Harrison's tactical displays showed attack patterns that utilized physics human science was only beginning to understand. Ensign Park's navigation systems calculated approach vectors through dimensions that didn't officially exist. Chief Engineer Thompson reported power levels that should have been impossible with their reactor specifications. Captain, Harrison reported, enhanced targeting systems are showing me the exact locations of the flagship's critical systems. The architect databases contain complete schematics for Council ship designs. Maria wasn't surprised. If humanity was the architect's revenge weapon, it made sense that they would have detailed intelligence about their enemy's technology. How detailed? Down to the individual circuit level, ma'am. The systems are showing me how to disable their weapons, their shields, their life support, and their command systems with surgical precision. And how to do it without destroying the ship entirely? Harrison checked his displays. Yes, ma'am. The architect protocols include options for disabling enemy vessels while keeping them intact for interrogation purposes. Maria nodded grimly. The architects had been thorough in their planning. They hadn't just created weapons to destroy their enemies. They had created tools to ensure that their enemies could be studied, understood, and prevented from ever threatening anyone again. All stations, begin approach to target, stealth systems to maximum. I want us to be right on top of them before they know we're there. The Ghost of Titan moved through space using principles that defied conventional understanding. Rather than traveling from point A to point B, the ship seemed to fold space around itself, bringing the destination closer while maintaining their original position. The effect was profoundly disorienting for anyone not enhanced by architect protocols. As they approached the Council flagship, Maria could see the massive vessel in perfect detail, despite being beyond the range of normal sensors. The ship was beautiful in its own way, a testament to thousands of years of technological refinement. Its hull curved gracefully, optimized for both atmospheric flight and deep space operation. Weapon ports were strategically positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire. Shield generators created a barely visible barrier around the entire vessel. It was also completely vulnerable to the weapons Maria's ship carried. "Captain," Harrison reported, "we're in optimal firing position. The Council ship's sensors show no indication they've detected our presence." Maria studied the targeting solutions flowing across her display. She could disable the flagship's weapons without damaging its hull. She could shut down their shields without alerting their crew. She could even override their life support systems to render the crew unconscious without killing them, or she could demonstrate exactly why the Galactic Council should never have threatened Earth. Target their primary weapon systems. I want them disabled but not destroyed. Let's show them what precision looks like. The Ghost of Titan's weapons fired, but not in any way that Council technology could detect or defend against. Energy beams that existed in folded dimensions struck the flagship's weapon systems from angles that didn't exist in normal space-time. The effect was immediate and devastating. On the Council flagship's bridge, every weapon system simply stopped functioning. Not damaged, not destroyed, just offline. Emergency systems activated as the ship's crew realized they were under attack. But their sensors showed nothing. No enemy vessels, no incoming fire, no energy signatures that would indicate hostile action. Maria watched the Council ship's confusion with grim satisfaction. "Communications, patch me through to the Council flagship. I want to talk to their commander." Moments later, Fleet Commander Zethkari's face appeared on her screen. The alien's expression showed a combination of shock and growing fear. "Council Commander," Maria said calmly. "This is Captain Maria Santos of the United Earth Space Command. Your weapons have been disabled as a demonstration of our capabilities. You are now defenseless against further attack." Zethkari's crest bristled with agitation. "Human vessel, our sensors detect no ships in our vicinity. How are you accomplishing this attack?" Maria smiled, and she knew the expression wouldn't be reassuring to the Council commander. "Commander, your sensors are designed to detect threats that operate within your understanding of physics. We operate beyond your understanding of physics." She gestured toward her tactical display, knowing that the gesture would be transmitted. "Your ship is currently surrounded by 47 human vessels, all invisible to your detection systems. Each one is capable of destroying your flagship in a matter of seconds. We have chosen not to do so because we want you to Delhi. For a message to your Council." "What message?" "Earth formally rejects the authority of the Galactic Cleansing Council. Furthermore, we are hereby notifying the Council that their cleansing operations against other species will cease immediately. Humanity will no longer tolerate genocide committed in the name of galactic stability." Zethkari's expression shifted from fear to outrage. "You cannot threaten the Council. We represent the lawful authority of galactic civilization." Maria's smile disappeared. "Commander, your civilization committed genocide against the species that created us. You built your lawful authority on the foundation of the greatest crime in galactic history. That authority is now revoked." She turned to Harrison. "Disable their shield generators." The Council flagship's defensive barriers flickered and died, leaving the massive vessel completely vulnerable. Emergency alarms could be heard in the background of the transmission as the Council crew realized the extent of their helplessness. "This is impossible," Zethkari whispered. "Council technology is the most advanced in the galaxy." "No," Maria replied quietly. "Council technology is the most stagnant in the galaxy. You've spent millions of years believing you were safe from retribution for your crimes. You've grown comfortable and complacent. Meanwhile, the architects spent millions of years preparing their response." She leaned forward toward the camera. "Commander, you came here to cleanse humanity from the galaxy. Instead, you're going to witness the end of Council dominance. What happens next depends entirely on whether your people choose to accept the new reality or continue resisting it." The transmission ended, leaving Zethkari staring at a blank screen aboard his disabled flagship, surrounded by invisible enemies wielding technology that made his fleet's weapons look like primitive clubs. Throughout the solar system, similar demonstrations were occurring as human vessels revealed themselves to the Council fleet. What had begun as a routine cleansing operation was rapidly becoming the Council's worst nightmare, facing an opponent they couldn't detect, couldn't understand, and couldn't defeat. High Counselor Veltar had overseen the Galactic Cleansing Council for nearly 2 centuries. And in all that time, she had never received a report like the one coming from the Sol system. Fleet Commander Zethkari's transmission had been brief, confused, and deeply troubling. An entire Council cleansing fleet had been rendered helpless by a species that shouldn't have possessed technology beyond chemical propulsion. Standing in the Council's primary chamber on the administrative world of Nexus Prime, Veltar reviewed the tactical data with growing alarm. The humans had not only successfully defended themselves against Council forces, they had done so using technology that defied every known principle of physics and military doctrine. High Counselor called Senior Analyst Krenthak from his position at the Central Data Hub. We've completed our analysis of the Sol system engagement. The results are unprecedented. Veltar's manipulator appendages twitched with nervous energy. Present your findings. The chamber's primary display activated, showing a three-dimensional representation of the Sol system during the engagement. Council vessels appeared as red markers while human positions were marked in blue. What disturbed Veltar immediately was the sheer number of blue markers. Intelligence estimates had suggested humanity possessed perhaps a dozen combat-capable vessels. The display showed nearly 200. The human fleet appears to have been completely hidden from our surveillance systems, Krenthak continued. Their vessels operate using technology that renders them essentially invisible to Council sensors. More concerning, their weapons operate on principles we cannot identify or counter. Veltar studied the engagement data with mounting horror. Council ships hadn't been destroyed. They had been selectively disabled with surgical precision. Weapons offline, shields down, propulsion systems inert, but life support and communication systems left intact. It was the kind of technological superiority that the Council had once enjoyed over primitive species, but turned against them. Analyst, what is your assessment of human technological capabilities based on this engagement? Krenthak's response was delayed, as if he was reluctant to voice his conclusions. High Counselor, based on the precision of their attacks and the sophistication of their stealth systems, human technology appears to be significantly more advanced than our own, possibly by centuries or millennia. The words hung in the chamber's atmosphere like a toxic cloud. For over 3 million years, the Galactic Council had maintained technological supremacy over every species in the galaxy. The idea that a young species from an isolated star system could possess superior capabilities challenged the very foundation of Council authority. How is this possible? Veltar demanded. Our monitoring stations have observed human development for over a century. They were using chemical rockets and nuclear fission. Their most advanced weapons were electromagnetic projectiles. High Counselor, another analyst called from across the chamber, we've detected additional anomalies in the Sol system. Long-range sensors are registering energy signatures that match ancient patterns. Veltar felt something cold move through her circulatory system. What kind of ancient patterns? The analyst's voice was barely above a whisper. Architect signatures, High Counselor. The chamber fell silent. The architects were legend, myth, cautionary tales told to young Council members about the dangers of unchecked technological development. According to the oldest records, they had been a species of incredible power and sophistication who had ruled the galaxy millions of years ago. They had been eliminated because their technology posed a threat to the natural order of galactic civilization. That's impossible, Veltar said firmly. The architects were eliminated during the Great Cleansing. Every trace of their technology was destroyed or contained. High Counselor, Krenthak said carefully, what if it wasn't? What if some architect technology survived, and the humans have somehow gained access to it? Veltar reviewed the tactical data again, this time looking for patterns that matched what little was known about architect capabilities. The precision of the human attacks, the complete invisibility of their vessels, the ability to disable Council technology without destroying it, all of it matched historical descriptions of architect tactical doctrine. Bring me the sealed archives, she commanded. I want every record we have about the Architect War and the Great Cleansing. As the archival data loaded into the chamber's systems, Veltar found herself confronting information that had been classified at the highest levels for millions of years. The official history taught that the architects had been eliminated because they posed a threat to galactic peace. The sealed archives told a different story. The architects hadn't been conquerors or aggressors. They had been benefactors, sharing their technology freely with younger species and helping to establish the first galactic confederation. They had created a golden age of cooperation and advancement that lasted for millions of years, and then they had been betrayed by the species they had helped. The conspiracy had been vast and carefully planned. Dozens of species, led by the ancestors of the current council races, had coordinated a simultaneous strike against Architect holdings throughout the galaxy. They had used Architect technology against its creators, corrupting the peaceful applications into weapons of war. The Architect War had lasted for centuries, ending only when the Architects chose to sacrifice themselves rather than continue a conflict that was destroying the galaxy they had tried to protect. But according to the sealed records, the Architects had not gone quietly into extinction. High Counselor, Krenthak said quietly, according to these archives, the Architects created safeguard systems before their destruction. Genetic locks that would preserve their technology for species that met specific criteria. Veltar reviewed the genetic specifications with growing dread. The Architects had been looking for a species aggressive enough to understand the need for powerful weapons, but not so corrupted as to use them for conquest. A species that could serve as guardians against the return of those who had committed the original genocide. Run a comparative analysis, she ordered. Cross-reference human genetic patterns with Architect genetic criteria. The results appeared on the display within minutes. Human DNA met every specification the Architects had established for their safeguard species. Not only met them, but exceeded them in ways that suggested the Architects had been directly involved in human development. High Counselor, Krenthak whispered, the humans aren't just using Architect technology. They are Architect technology. The entire species appears to have been designed as a weapon system. Veltar stared at the genetic analysis, finally understanding the true scope of what they were facing. The humans weren't a primitive species that had stumbled onto advanced technology. They were the Architect's final creation, a living weapon system designed specifically to ensure that the crimes committed against their creators could never be repeated. What are the humans demanding? She asked. According to Fleet Commander Zeth Kari's latest reports, they are demanding the immediate cessation of all cleansing operations. They claim authority over Council policies regarding species elimination. Veltar felt her worst fears being confirmed. The humans aren't just defending themselves. They were challenging the entire foundation of Council authority. If they truly possessed Architect technology and capabilities, they could enforce their demands throughout the galaxy. High Counselor, another analyst called urgently. We're receiving priority transmissions from monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Human vessels are appearing in Council space. They're not attacking, but they're observing. The main display shifted to show a galactic map with red markers indicating human ship positions. There were thousands of them, positioned near every major Council world and installation. Ships that had appeared without warning, invisible to detection until they chose to reveal themselves. They're conducting surveillance operations on every Council facility, the analyst continued. Scanning our defenses, mapping our installations, recording our capabilities. It's as if they're preparing for war, Veltar finished quietly. She stood in the chamber, surrounded by the evidence of her civilization's greatest mistake. Millions of years ago, the Council's ancestors had committed genocide against the galaxy's most advanced species. They had believed themselves safe from retribution, protected by time and the thoroughness of their crime. They had been wrong. Send a message to Fleet Commander Zeth Kari, she ordered. Inform him that he is to withdraw his fleet from the Sol system immediately. No hostile action is to be taken against human forces under any circumstances. High Counselor, what about the cleansing operation? Veltar looked at the display showing human ships positioned throughout Council space, watching, waiting, evaluating the species that had murdered their creators. The cleansing operation is cancelled, she said quietly. In fact, all cleansing operations are hereby suspended indefinitely. We are no longer in a position to determine which species deserve to survive. She turned to address the Chamber's staff. Prepare a priority message to all Council worlds. Inform them that first contact protocols with humanity are now our highest priority. We need to determine if the Architect's final creation is interested in justice or revenge. As alarms began sounding throughout the Council chamber, Veltar realized that the galaxy was about to change in ways that no one could predict. The age of Council dominance was ending, and the age of human judgment was about to begin. Ambassador. Elena Vasquez had never expected to find herself sitting across a negotiation table from the beings responsible for nearly exterminating her species. The council delegation chamber on Nexus Prime was vast and imposing, designed to intimidate representatives from younger civilizations. Today the roles were reversed. Sitting beside her, Admiral Chen maintained the calm demeanor that had served her well during Earth's military crisis. But Elena could see the subtle signs of the architect enhancements in the Admiral's posture and awareness. Like all humans who had interfaced with the ancient technology, Chen now possessed capabilities that put her on a fundamentally different level from any other species in the galaxy. Across the curved table, High Counselor Veltar and her advisors appeared distinctly uncomfortable. The Council's body language experts had clearly briefed them about human behavioral patterns, but the enhanced humans sitting before them didn't follow any of those patterns. They moved with precision that bordered on mechanical, spoke with certainty that suggested access to information beyond normal perception, and radiated a quiet confidence that made it clear they were not intimidated by Council authority. Ambassador Vasquez, High Counselor Veltar began, her translator converting her chemical communication into audible speech. The Council is prepared to formally withdraw the cleansing order against humanity. We acknowledge that our initial assessment of your species was incomplete. Elena smiled, but it wasn't a reassuring expression. The architect enhancements had given her access to psychological profiles of every Council species, along with detailed analysis of their communication patterns and cultural biases. She knew exactly how to respond to achieve maximum effect. High Counselor, Earth appreciates the Council's willingness to correct their mistake. However, the cleansing order against humanity was never our primary concern. Veltar's manipulator appendages twitched nervously. What do you mean? We're more interested in discussing the cleansing orders against other species. The Zephyrians who were eliminated last year, the crystalline collective that was destroyed 3 years ago, the nomadic fleets that have been systematically hunted to extinction over the past century. Elena activated a holographic display that showed the locations of recent Council cleansing operations. The number of extinct species was staggering, representing billions of lives that had been eliminated in the name of galactic stability. The Council has been committing genocide on an industrial scale, Elena continued. And according to the historical records we've accessed, this has been standard policy for over 3 million years. Admiral Chen leaned forward slightly. High Counselor, humanity has been reviewing the architect historical databases. We now have complete records of the war that established Council dominance. We know exactly how your civilization achieved its current position. The chamber fell silent. Elena could see the Council delegation exchanging nervous glances as they realized the full scope of what humanity had discovered. The architects were your benefactors, Elena said quietly. They shared their technology, helped establish galactic civilization, and created the first confederation of peaceful species. And your ancestors repaid them by organizing the greatest act of genocide in galactic history. High Counselor Veltar's communication organs fluttered with distress. Ambassador, those events occurred millions of years ago. The current Council cannot be held responsible for ancient history, but you can be held responsible for continuing those policies, Admiral Chen replied. Every species you've eliminated was guilty of the same crime as humanity, being too aggressive, too expansionist, too dangerous to be allowed to survive. You've been systematically preventing the rise of any species that might challenge Council authority. Elena activated another display showing current Council surveillance operations. Your monitoring stations are present in the territory of over 40 species that are currently being evaluated for cleansing. You're not maintaining galactic stability, High Counselor. You're maintaining galactic stagnation. Senior Analyst Krenthak spoke up from his position beside the High Counselor. Ambassador, the Council's policies have maintained peace throughout the galaxy for millions of years. Without preventive measures, aggressive species would eventually threaten peaceful civilizations. Elena's smile returned, and this time it was genuinely amused. Analyst, you're speaking to a species that was classified as aggressive and dangerous 3 days ago. Do we seem like a threat to peaceful civilizations? You have thousands of warships positioned throughout Council space, Krenthak pointed out. We have thousands of research vessels conducting anthropological studies, Admiral Chen corrected. Our scientists are documenting Council policies and their effects on galactic development. We're not here to conquer anyone. We're here to understand the full scope of the damage your policies have caused. Elena brought up data showing the technological and cultural development curves of various galactic civilizations. The evidence is clear, High Counselor. Under Council guidance, technological advancement has slowed to near stagnation. Cultural development has been artificially constrained. Biological evolution has been limited by the systematic elimination of any species that develops beyond specific parameters. You've turned the galaxy into a zoo, Admiral Chen added, a carefully maintained collection of species that are allowed to exist only as long as they remain primitive and non-threatening. High Counselor Veltar's communication became agitated. The Council has prevented countless wars and maintained stability across thousands of star systems. The Council has prevented growth, Elena replied firmly. You've created a galaxy of permanent children, incapable of reaching their full potential because you eliminate anyone who tries to mature. Beyond your arbitrary limitations, she activated a final display, showing population and development statistics across Council space. High Counselor, do you know how many species have achieved faster than light travel in the past million years without Council assistance? The Council provides technological guidance to deserving species. 0, Elena said simply. Not a single species has been allowed to develop FTL capability independently. Every species that attempts it gets classified as potentially aggressive and marked for observation. If they continue developing, they get cleansed. If they stop developing, they get permanently dependent on Council technology. Admiral Chen stood and walked to the large viewing port that showed the sprawling cityscape of Nexus Prime below. This entire civilization is built on the foundation of systematic oppression. You've convinced yourselves that you're maintaining peace, but what you've actually created is a galactic prison. What are you proposing? High Counselor Veltar asked quietly. Elena and Admiral Chen exchanged glances. This was the moment they had been preparing for since discovering the full scope of Architect. Technology and its implications for galactic civilization. The Council will immediately cease all cleansing operations, Elena announced. All species currently marked for elimination will be removed from Council threat assessments. All monitoring stations in non-Council space will be withdrawn. Impossible, Krenthak objected. Without preventive measures, the galaxy will descend into chaos. No, Admiral Chen said, turning back to face the Council delegation. Without preventive measures, the galaxy will finally be allowed to grow. Species will be free to develop their full potential. They'll make mistakes, certainly. They'll have conflicts. But they'll also achieve things that your stagnant system has made impossible. Elena activated one final display, this one showing the current positions of human vessels throughout the galaxy. High Counselor, humanity is now the dominant military force in the galaxy. We have the technology and capability to enforce our decisions, but we would prefer to achieve this transition through negotiation rather than force. And if the Council refuses? Then the Council will discover what the architects were capable of when they were forced to defend themselves, Admiral Chen replied calmly. The difference is that humanity has had millions of years to improve on their designs. High Counselor Veltar stared at the human representatives, finally understanding that her civilization was facing the same choice the architects had once faced: surrender their dominance willingly, or lose it through force. What guarantee do we have that humanity won't simply replace Council tyranny with human tyranny? Elena smiled, and for the first time the expression was genuinely warm. Because, High Counselor, we're not interested in ruling the galaxy. We're interested in freeing it. Humanity will serve as guarantors of galactic liberty, ensuring that no species ever again faces extinction for the crime of being successful. She leaned back in her chair. The age of Council dominance is over. The age of galactic freedom is about to begin. The only question is whether that transition happens peacefully or through the kind of war that ended the architect, civilization. The chamber fell silent as the Council delegation contemplated the end of everything their civilization had known for 3 million years. 5 years after the Nexus Accords were signed, Captain James Wright stood on the observation deck of the UES Liberation, watching a sight that would have been impossible under the old galactic order. Below them, the planet Kepler 442b buzzed with activity, as 3 different species worked together to establish the galaxy's first truly independent colony. The Zephyrian survivors, rescued from Council detention facilities, were using their natural atmospheric manipulation abilities to optimize the planet's weather patterns. The crystalline collective remnants, thought extinct until human search teams found their hidden archives, were growing mineral formations that would serve as the foundation for the colony's infrastructure. And the human colonists were coordinating the entire effort, using architect technology to ensure that all 3 species could thrive in the same environment. "Captain," called Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the communication station, "we're receiving the weekly status report from the Galactic Liberation Fleet. 47 species have been removed from Council monitoring lists this month. 12 new civilizations have achieved independent faster-than-light capability." James nodded with satisfaction. The transition hadn't been easy, but it was proceeding faster than anyone had expected. Once species learned that they were no longer under threat of elimination for technological advancement, their development rates had increased exponentially. "Any resistance from Council loyalists?" "Minimal, sir." The Hegemony faction attempted to establish a monitoring station in the Rigel system, but they withdrew when the ghost of Arcturus appeared on their sensors. James smiled. The Human Liberation Fleet had grown to over 3,000 vessels in the past 5 years, each one equipped with enhanced architect technology that made them effectively invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. The mere knowledge that human ships could appear anywhere at any time had been sufficient to deter most attempts at returning to the old ways. "Captain," came another voice from across the bridge. "Dr. Yates is requesting permission to come aboard. She says she has important findings from the Architect archaeological site on Proxima Centauri." "Granted. Have her meet me in Conference Room Alpha." 20 minutes later, James found himself sitting across from Dr. Elizabeth Yates, who looked remarkably unchanged despite the 5 years that had passed since the crisis began. The Architect enhancements had stabilized human aging processes, extending lifespans and improving physical capabilities in ways that were still being discovered. "Doctor, what have you found?" Elizabeth activated a holographic display showing complex mathematical equations and star charts. "Captain, we've been analyzing the deepest levels of the Architect databases and we've discovered something remarkable. The Architects didn't just create humanity as a safeguard against their enemies. They created us as the next phase of galactic evolution." James studied the data flowing across the display. "Explain." "The galaxy goes through cycles," Elizabeth continued. "Every few million years, the dominant civilization becomes stagnant and begins suppressing the development of younger species. Eventually, a safeguard species emerges to break the cycle and allow galactic civilization to advance to the next level." She highlighted specific sections of the historical data. "Humanity isn't the first species the Architects created for this purpose. They've been doing it for billions of years, always planning for the eventual corruption of whatever civilization they helped establish." James felt a chill of understanding. "Are you saying we're part of a repeating pattern?" "Not exactly. Each cycle builds on the previous one. The Architects learned from their mistakes and improved their safeguard designs. We're not just another iteration, Captain. We're the culmination of billions of years of development." Elizabeth brought up genetic analysis data showing the enhanced human genome. "The Architect technology isn't just tools and weapons. It's a complete evolutionary upgrade. Every human who interfaces with the systems is being prepared for capabilities that we can barely imagine." "Prepared for what?" "For the next phase of galactic civilization. The Architects called it the Transcendence Protocol. When a sufficient number of species achieve full technological and cultural maturity, the entire galaxy undergoes a fundamental transformation." James reviewed the technical specifications flowing across the display. The scope was staggering. According to the Architect projections, a mature galactic civilization would be capable of manipulating spacetime on a macro scale, establishing communication with other galaxies, and eventually transcending physical limitations entirely. How close are we to achieving this? Unknown. The Architect's calculations suggest it requires approximately 50 species to achieve complete technological independence while maintaining peaceful cooperation. We're currently at 12. Elizabeth's expression became serious. But Captain, there's something else. The Architect databases contain records of what happens if the Transcendence Protocol fails. If too many species are eliminated before reaching maturity, the galaxy enters a permanent stagnation phase. No further evolution, no advancement, just endless repetition of the same basic patterns. The Council was close to causing that. The Council had already caused it. When we took action 5 years ago, galactic civilization was approximately 50 years away from permanent stagnation. If humanity hadn't emerged when we did, this galaxy would have been locked into its current state forever. James stood and walked to the observation port, looking down at the colony world where 3 species were working together to build something new. So we're not just liberating the galaxy from Council tyranny. We're saving it from evolutionary death. Exactly. And Captain, the implications go beyond just this galaxy. According to the architect records, there are other galaxies facing similar crises. If we can successfully guide this galaxy through the Transcendence Protocol, we might be able to help them as well. James turned back to face Elizabeth. Doctor, how long do the architects project it will take to achieve galactic transcendence? With current progress rates, approximately 200 years. But that's assuming we can maintain peaceful development and avoid the kind of catastrophic war that destroyed the architects. And our role in this process? Elizabeth smiled. We're the gardeners, Captain. We protect the growing species, prevent interference from stagnant civilizations, and guide the galaxy toward its full potential. It's what we were designed for. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. Lieutenant Kim's voice came through the communication system. Captain, we're receiving a message from Admiral Chen at Earth Command. She says it's urgent. Put her through. Admiral Chen's image appeared on the conference room display. She looked tired but determined. Captain Wright, Dr. Yates, we've received first contact signals from the Andromeda Galaxy. They're requesting assistance with what appears to be their own Council-equivalent civilization. James and Elizabeth exchanged glances. The Transcendence Protocol was expanding faster than anyone had anticipated. Admiral, what are your orders? Prepare the liberation for extragalactic deployment. We're about to find out if the architect technology works beyond our own galaxy's boundaries. Elizabeth began reviewing the technical requirements for intergalactic travel. Captain, this is unprecedented. We'll be representing not just humanity, but the entire concept of galactic liberation to a completely foreign civilization. James nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with humanity's new role in the universe. Doctor, 5 years ago we were facing extinction. Now we're being asked to liberate other galaxies. I'd say that's progress. He activated the ship's communication system. All stations prepare for enhanced deployment protocols. We're about to discover if the galaxy we've been fighting to free is ready to help free others. As the liberation began preparations for its historic mission, James looked out at the colony world one more time. Somewhere below, 3 species that had nearly been eliminated by Council policies were working together to build a future that would have been impossible under the old order. The architects had been patient, waiting millions of years for their final creation to mature enough to carry their legacy forward. Now humanity was ready to fulfill that legacy, not just in their own galaxy, but throughout the universe. The aliens had called it cleansing. Earth had called it the end of restraint. History would remember it as the beginning of true galactic freedom. And in the vast emptiness between galaxies, other civilizations waited for the liberation that humanity was uniquely equipped to provide.